Hello, the Western Washington University Marketing Department and the Western Washington University Alumni Association are excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Nonprofit and Public Sector Marketing. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. Western Washington University's main campus is located in the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin all throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to our indigenous neighbors for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Hello, everyone. It's a joy to be here. I am Liliana Deck, and I teach nonprofit marketing here at Western Washington University. I also graduated from Western, where I got my MBA. My professional and academic work involves research, education, healthcare in the social sectors, serving vulnerable population. My research is focused on migration, family, education in fragile contexts, working with local and global nonprofits organizations in the United States, Colombia, and beyond. We're excited to welcome our panelists today, Heidi Aylesworth and Katie Johnson. Heidi, let's start with you. Please tell us a little something about yourself.
Hi, and thanks, Liliana. Happy to be here today. I'm Heidi Aylesworth. I currently work up in Alaska, so greetings from Juneau. And I started my career as a clinical dietitian. So I've been in healthcare for 28 years. Started as a clinical dietitian in Yakima and did some operational management there. Then went to Western to get my MBA with Liliana, as in the same class. And following that, I then worked for 20 years for a major health system in Seattle and did strategy, business development, operations, finance, basically a ton of things within that organization. And for the last 2 years, I've been up in Alaska with the Southeast Alaska Regional Health Consortium, which is a tribal health company that basically serves the Southeast Alaska region. And so very pleased to be here. And here I do strategy, business development, and I run marketing.
Thanks, Heidi. Katie, please tell us something about you.
Hi, well, I definitely don't have as beautiful a natural backdrop behind me today. I'm not in Southeast Alaska. I'm actually reaching all of you from Skagit County, where I live. I work on Bellingham's, Western's Bellingham campus primarily. I'm originally from South Carolina. I attended Clemson University, where I studied Spanish and international business. I feel like that undergraduate experience and the study of Spanish and the cultural aspects was a really eye-opening experience for me in terms of some travel and educational experiences I have. After graduating, several years later, I moved out to the Northwest with a small dream to stay in the Seattle area and work for probably 6 months to a year. And many, many years later, here I am. I originally worked for a for-profit organization, a manufacturing company in the outdoor industry based on Bainbridge Island. It was an incredible experience early in my career. I worked on the sales and marketing team there, but it was, so much. I learned so much because we had manufacturing, operations, all of our accounting and finance, kind of all divisions of the company like housed in this location with about 150 employees. So eventually I moved my way just a little further north up to Bellingham to actually do my MBA at Western. I left for a couple of years working for another for-profit company in Bellingham that is in the supply chain consulting industry. Then found my way back to Western 8 years ago, working on behalf of the MBA program. And I think, beyond that, what's maybe pertinent for today is just some of the work that I do outside of Western, some volunteer board service that I participate in with both social and environmental components. And so I think I'll today, reflect on some of that work as well, including some of the work that I do at Western, while acknowledging that what I do from a marketing standpoint at Western is kind of a small part of the overall marketing that Western does. So I'll touch on that and, hearken a little from my experience with my colleagues in some of the other divisions at the university.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. Some
Sure.
of you have submitted some questions with your registration, and we appreciate those. Thank you so much, and we'll try to get through those as many as we can. As we move through our discussion today, please use the Zoom Q&A feature, which should be in the bottom middle of your screen, to send us any questions that might come to mind. We'll be responding to those questions throughout the discussion today, the best that we can. So, okay, we're going to start. Thank you for those introductions. And my first question, you kind of touch about it, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. And I want to hear from both of you in your both fields in education, higher education for Katie and healthcare for Heidi. Can you speak to the trajectory of your own journey in those specific fields in healthcare? So maybe I'll start with Heidi for healthcare, and then we move to Katie for education.
Sure.
My journey is definitely not traditional in any way, yet it's not, when I talk to a lot of my peers, it's also not unusual either. So most people enter healthcare in a clinical realm. So me as a dietitian, some people as pharmacy techs, nurses, and it's not essential. So I think there's a perception that to work in healthcare, you have to have a clinical background. Most of the people I work with every day have business backgrounds or something totally not clinical as the way they entered healthcare. So I think that's one of the messages I wanted to get across is I entered as a clinician, but that's not the only entry point. But for me, entering the healthcare system that way, doing patient care, helped really with the trajectory of visibility into different parts of the organization and helping me navigate where I was most interested in working. And so practicing clinically, getting to kind of see the clinical part of healthcare delivery was fantastic. I liked management pretty quickly. And so within a year of being a dietitian, I ended up running the food service department, managing the dietitians that had just trained me, and really just being super interested in kind of how the business of healthcare works. And I then wanted to obviously start climbing the business kind of part of healthcare. So the MBA was really kind of that stepping stone to allow me to continue to climb organizationally. And I remember a fantastic conversation with Dr. Senge, and I said, okay, I'm getting the MBA, it's my way to potentially go out of healthcare someday. And I remember him saying, if you can figure out how to manage and lead within a healthcare organization, given its complexity, you can leave healthcare anytime and take that skill. There's very few industries as complex from a finance, regulatory, it's one of those most complicated delivery of or services that are out there. So he said, keep going in healthcare, you can leave anytime, but it's a unique skill set to have in healthcare. So when I joined the larger health system in Seattle, I started as a financial analyst, because again, I kind of wanted to get away from the clinical realm. Found my way back into project management, ended up running basically a quarter of the health system in that location, and really got deep operational experience, which then served and financial experience, that then served as a foundation to go into strategy, business development, marketing, because I had the clinical foundation, I had then the operational and the finance foundation. And I believe those are important kind of building blocks to do strategy and business development. A lot of people, it's the fun stuff, right? And so everyone wants to come in and go right to what I call the fun stuff and do marketing. But to me, what's helped me be successful and strong is having the foundations in the core business before I entered the realm of strategy, business development, and marketing.
Well, congratulations for a great career. And Katie, please tell us about your own journey to higher ed.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. So when I first moved out to the Northwest and I joined this organization I mentioned earlier, an outdoor industry, I was actually hired on in the sales and marketing team. And I was pretty young and I was really game to kind of just get in and do whatever I needed to do. And like I said, I thought this would be like a 6-month to a year-long journey. Working on the marketing team, though, turned out to be a huge blessing, because as part of that, we were a small marketing organization, but as part of that, we worked with our engineers and designers, because we were constantly thinking about, well, what are the new products that are going to be coming out? How are we going to be at this time, I'll say like slightly pre-social media. How are we going to be finding out from our customers, like what the market demands and what is that market? Because we sold rods all over the world, fly rods. So it was kind of understanding not just what was in demand in the Rockies, it was what was in demand in Europe and in Australia and Asia. And so it was a wonderful lesson in kind of learning how you think about different products for different markets, when those products are released, at what prices are those products released. And I was very fortunate to work at that time with some amazing advertising agencies in Seattle who did beautiful work. Those were the days when we were still printing gorgeous glossy catalogs with incredible storytelling and writing. They've kind of moved away from that, obviously, in recent years and pushed most of that to the website and social media and all that kind of stuff now. But it was just a wonderful experience. And even though, I was in that marketing team, there was just so much professional interaction with all of the parts of the business. And what I grew to understand over time was that was really where my heart was. I was always wanting to know kind of like what the bigger picture was and how do we think about, the financial implications. And really interestingly, I guess it was probably about a year after I had been there, this company had been operating privately owned for many years. And they started a journey of procuring some other brands to kind of nestle underneath them. Other rod companies, fly lines, flies, reels. This might sound like a foreign language to someone that doesn't fly fish or isn't into the sort of outdoors. But that again was an incredible journey, and seeing how, how do you take kind of this high-end US made product and sell to some of those same dealers something that's made overseas with much lesser quality, lower price. And how do you differentiate those products in the market? How do you, within your own organization, figure out kind of who's doing what? Like, do you lump all your marketing team together, or do you keep those groups separate? All of the kind of bringing products from overseas issues from a supply chain standpoint become, it's really different than being able to manufacture right under your nose in a completely different way. So it was, it was just a really amazing journey. I'm so glad that, although I wasn't a marketing undergraduate major, I did take a lot of marketing classes, and those really served me well. And so I think it gave me kind of a broader exposure.
That's actually the perfect segue. Thank you for that, because my next question is, the three of us actually move between the for-profit, the corporate sector, and the nonprofit back and forth. And I was wondering if you touch about it a little bit, but maybe you can speak to the differences and similarities between the corporate sector and the nonprofit sector that you take for each of you. So who wants to start?
Go for it, Katie.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I do think, there's a bit of a difference. Some of the foundations and fundamentals are the same. In my case, when I worked at this for-profit company in Seattle, we were selling things to dealers who sold to people. And so it was a very, it was pretty clear kind of what our products were and who we were selling to. And I think, in my experience I'll think about Western at this point, really. I actually try really hard not to think of my students and the work that I do from a recruitment standpoint as selling something. In fact, I often joke that I hope to never sell anyone. I actually like to provide information and have them, make really sensible decisions about their future, whether or not we fit into it. So, but the reality is, even in the nonprofit world at Western, we are selling our education, and students look at that way. They look at the competitive landscape. They look at our our program, for example, and they look at the many other choices that they have out there that are in person and online and hybrid. And that environment has become more and more competitive because people are obviously much more connected. Everyone's has gotten very good at Zoom and Teams and all of the electronic ways of communicating. So, it's really been, it's been an interesting journey in that respect. So again, I say, like, we're not selling something, but, we really are. And our students, I think of it that way very much. They're paying for a service. We're a state organization, so we are a nonprofit, but I think a lot of the fundamentals and the marketing fundamentals are the same.
Which is, we do that in healthcare. So maybe Heidi, you can expand from education into healthcare. How do you balance those two?
Well, that's what's challenging in healthcare is, anytime you go to a party and you say you do business development or marketing or strategy for healthcare, people just kind of do this and think I'm chasing ambulances all around town. And, the reality of what we're selling in healthcare is trust. No one wants to use our service. No one, we're the thing you need, but no one really wants. But it's a necessary thing. And so what you're selling is, we have to somehow encourage people to trust us before they even know they need us. Because usually when you need us now. And so you need that brand, that trust, that name recognition before anyone even needs it. And so I think that's what makes marketing in healthcare fascinating and challenging at the same time is, you're trying to do all this preemptive stuff and hope through wellness and things, at the aspects of healthcare that people feel more comfortable interacting with. They then trust you when something big, scary happens. As far as the nonprofit, for-profit piece, healthcare, we commingle. We live in both worlds a lot. Most healthcare organizations, by their nature, are nonprofit, but we interact, whether it's supply chain, a lot of our providers that live in a for-profit world. So we live in both worlds every day, and you need both worlds to be successful in healthcare.
Well, thank you for bringing the concept of branding, the promise of the organization. What are we doing? What are we telling our, whoever client, patient, student is? Which brings me to the next question is, I'm curious to hear if you can share some of the national or regional trends you see in your own industry for healthcare or education. I know, Heidi, you're in Alaska, but you're moving in this region. So maybe you can start telling us what you see at the regional, national, and even local level. What are the differences? What are you seeing?
So the last 10 years in healthcare has been really 10 years of consolidation. If you look back 10 years, every community had their own local hospital and it had that local feel. But the economics of healthcare just couldn't sustain that. And so the last 10 years, which has been fascinating for someone who does mergers and acquisitions and all this stuff for a living, it's just been amazing to kind of see the consolidation of individual hospitals, individual clinics into clusters of clinics, into, regional health systems, into national health systems. And, there's some that say, in the future, you're going to have the government system, you're going to have a Kaiser-like HMO system, and you're going to have, probably a Catholic health system and another for-profit health system. And there's many that, healthcare strategists that say basically you'll end up with 4 major health systems eventually, just given the economics of healthcare. And the pandemic very much brought that to the forefront because, you go from marketing services to just all of a sudden we're marketing just public health and awareness and trying to be a source of truth. And so I think there's been a lot of trends in healthcare, but I'd say the consolidation and going from the rebranding, when you look at any of the healthcare markets or wherever you live, and Bellingham's a simpler market, but if you look at Seattle and you go from little systems to bigger systems, and then all these name changes, and how do you say, yes, we're part of a bigger brand, but we're still providing that care locally to you, and we're still the same. You translate that to tribal healthcare in Alaska, and it's the same thing where, we're considered a large health system here, but we're still serving communities of 50 people, communities of 35,000 people, and everything in the middle. And how do you always kind of balance that we are your local provider, we know your community, with we're linked to a broader health system throughout Southeast Alaska, but we're also linked to tertiary quaternary care in Anchorage with our tribal health partners, or in Seattle with our partners there. So it's that constant balance, but this constant consolidation is the biggest trend, I think, other than our little tangent with the pandemic, that has influenced healthcare the last 10 years.
Thank you. How about you, Katie? Because education is a public service. We're at Western. We have that privilege to be here teaching or working. What can you tell us about the trends you see at an MBA or other higher ed?
Yeah, I think, gosh, there's probably so many. I'll just highlight a few that really come to mind for me. I think, the last couple of years have, has been such a journey for all of us. And even prior to the pandemic, I think we were really experiencing a lot of sort of social pressure to catch up and adapt with the shifting demographics in our state. And I think of that as well, not just at Western, but with some of the, and particularly one of the socially oriented nonprofit organizations that I work with in Whatcom County, just adapting to better serve, for example, their Latinx population, to expand their work beyond kind of what they've been doing really well for quite some time. And thinking about how do we expand to other counties and how do we better serve, for example, Skagit County. I mean, we need more Spanish speaking employees. We need just a whole host of resources to be able to kind of make that shift as the demographic shift. I also think, just kind of the hyper connectivity of the world we live in and the need for alignment in all of your messaging. I think if you're a small local nonprofit, I mean, it used to be perfectly acceptable. You had your list of maybe 100 to 250 to 200 people that you would host an event for, reach out to by email, send your annual report, and you could kind of count on maybe a steady stream of donations. But now, grants have changed. They have different requirements to show how you're addressing some of those, changed social expectations, and also how you're serving, better serving underserved parts of your community. So there are a lot of parts and pieces that, just doing what you've always done simply doesn't work anymore. And I think, from a messaging standpoint, I mean, if you're Western, obviously making sure that all of the communication is in alignment. And I think, we've had a really big push of that coming from folks much higher in the organization than me, just really talking about, what it is that we are promising our students and, reaching out into different markets to make sure that we are aligning our student body with the demographics here in Washington. So,
well, thank you, Katie. This actually, but we actually are getting tons of questions.
Oh,
so
good.
This is actually perfect because you've given us some kind of context of like how the world, the nonprofit sector is working. And I want to go into the nitty gritty, like doing what are some of the marketing channels that are more successful, your biggest priority, and which ones are the least? So what are you using to communicate your brand, your nonprofit? Heidi, you want to start?
Sure. So I live in a very direct-to-consumer world. So my primary audience is always building trust with our patients and our communities. And so my channel is, we do a bunch of social media. We do a lot of PR, but everything I do is about our patients and how to best communicate on as frequently as possible with our patients about what we offer and just building that trust. Okay.
And how about you, Katie? How do you reach out to your potential partners, your student organizations, employers?
Yeah, well, I'm sure if Ed Love's on this call, he'll appreciate me saying this, but I do think about the marketing funnel often. And, as the MBA program within Western, I acknowledge that we are pretty far down the funnel. We have students that have to be undergraduate, they have to have their undergraduate degrees. They typically have some work experience, they have jobs. They're a bit of a different demographic than what I would say would be a 17 to 25-year-old undergraduate student. So I think the larger organization in marketing at Western is looking kind of into a much larger pool of folks from around the Northwest, certainly beyond Washington. And they use tactics that include like geolocating and billboards and banner ads and all kinds of really advanced media tools that help bring just a simple lead to the table. From the MBA standpoint, unfortunately, we don't really have the funding that, I always sort of used to make the joke that like, we're never gonna wrap a NASCAR vehicle, okay? Like we're not gonna have billboards all over the Seattle area, unfortunately. And that's okay because we have a program of 95 to 100 students. And so we don't need to do that. To compete with our Everett program, we do a bit in the Everett, Snohomish County area. But, one thing I really pride myself on with our program is, we don't leave any lead unturned. We still call it old-fashioned, try to make a really personal connection with our students that find us either through the web or through our online advertising. And we kind of have gone away from sort of the steady stream of canned emails, which, you get like, you click on sort of one MBA ad online and you get, 1,000 emails from here on out. We try to really personalize those. And honestly, the technology with Zoom and Teams has made connecting with people on a personal level a lot easier than inviting them to come to campus. So that's been positive. But I think a lot of it depends on scale and it depends on resources and budget. And I think that's a challenge that nonprofits of, almost any size face. And so we can dream really big. And there are a lot of tools out there, but a lot of times I feel, at least for us, that we have to make tough decisions about the things that really work best and provide results. And for us, we have a really high conversion when we can give people kind of a personal touch, a high level of advising and things like that. I mean, I think a little bit of that for you, Heidi, probably is a factor too, when you think about like, how do you reach out into these communities? If, you're this healthcare organization, there's still a certain amount of like knowing that community and providing that kind of personal perspective.
Well, thank you for bringing the personal perspective, Katie, because one of the things, some of our participants on the webinar are coming from a very small nonprofits. So Western, we're big, the hospitals are big, but my next question is more like, what is one campaign that you have worked in that is, what do you think it was successful and how did you make it successful? Like, and that some tools that our participants can take away from them with you today. Can you speak, and maybe for public health, Heidi, I don't know if you have something for like something recent that has happened.
Well, for us, it's obviously our COVID communications and, the need to stand up. So for us, I prefer my campaigns to be about wellness and screenings and, things like that. But I think, our most successful campaign, just from the sheer speed that we had to get it out, how many people we needed to reach and how many communities, how much misinformation we were trying to combat, and just how many channels we had to use simultaneously. And so, we were on social media constantly. We were, posters and, using our testing tents as a chance to do information sharing, every interview we could do, newspaper, website. We hit every single channel that was available, and how to make it so interactive with a hotline. I'm like, rarely do we do hotlines for campaigns, but we had nurses on hotlines. And, for us, it's one of those, absolutely every channel's in play, consistent messaging, constant messaging, and getting out ahead of all the other campaigns, sending information working against you, and trying to really activate people. Usually when you're activating for breast cancer screening, colon awareness screening, you've got a window to do that. And for this, whether it was testing or vaccination, it was how to activate with an urgency for immediate action. And so it was all channels, it was urgent, it was, get it right, because any misinformation is going to come back to haunt you and ruin that trust that you've built. And so to me, I think that's the one that's just clearest in my mind, because it's been kind of 2 years of our life.
So you talk about different channels that you use, and it was like not only projecting the brand and communicating, but you also counteracting some of the information that is coming for you. So you're doing both back and forth. How about you, Katie? What can you tell us about higher ed, or that someone can take away from today?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for whoever asked that. One thing that I always try to keep in mind, and I think this applies to the work that I do at Western, it also, and we're always trying to do better at this. And I think of several of the nonprofits that I work with, and one in particular that I used to be on their board, I'm not anymore, is staying consistent and also providing value to those customers when you don't need something from them. For example, I used to work with an environmental nonprofit in Whatcom County, who really is they're an outstanding organization. The work they do, there's 14 of these, or at least there were at the time, similar organizations throughout the state of Washington, and they really, along with maybe one or two others, really stood out in terms of the funding and the support they received. They did so much throughout the year. They weren't just asking, like putting out their annual ask to their donors in this case. It was always providing opportunities for their constituents and to be part of the organization, come and do work on these streams and participate in these different events, like not asking for a lot of money, right?
Right.
And so I think there's this idea that, when you have constrained resources, you have to sort of save those up and have it be like some big thing that you present, some big marketing campaign or some big fundraising event or annual auction. And I acknowledge that those are really valuable too. And if you have the luxury of doing it all, then, do all the things. But I also think that what is often overlooked is kind of that consistent messaging, a consistent providing of value. I mean, I think of that with our students and our alumni. I'm always looking for ways to kind of continue to provide value to our alums, because frankly, they are the ones that often can provide jobs for our students, or might provide funding for us when we have an initiative or scholarship that we want to put together. So I'm by no means saying that we're perfect in doing that, but I think it's an easy thing to bite off. Is just thinking kind of that consistency throughout the cycle.
Some of our participants are asking questions, for instance, like if it's a small nonprofit and they have to write grants and they have to do all this kind of, we're low on resources, we're overworked, understaffed, underpaid, so it's always a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can share some of the favorite accounts that you follow in your field, who that are doing a great job, maybe some best practices, some examples of people or organizations that you look up to, that you follow, for us as a small organizations can learn from. Do you have a...
Heidi, I don't want to jump in front of you again.
Go ahead.
Honestly, in higher education, we're very fortunate because there are a lot of networks that bring kind of thought leaders together. There's a lot of conferences because academics love conferences. And so there are certain things that weave those opportunities together for us where we get to kind of learn. I'm trying to think, I mean, I don't know if this would really be relevant if you worked outside of higher education, but the Graduate Management Admissions Council is one I look to. They do a lot of research. They, I guess actually, you know, maybe this is a good point, right? So even if you don't work in higher education, a lot of times there are larger regional or national organizations do research within that type of business or nonprofit. And so like really looking to those groups for like to do the data collection, because you can't do that if you're a small sort of local organization, like figuring out kind of like what the demographic trends are. I mean, usually there's not anybody on staff that's like at the ready to do that kind of work. So I think reaching out to these kind of regional groups and finding ways to kind of, you know, find out what other people that do what you do, how they do it. And sharing ideas is always welcomed. I mean, I don't know that there's like a specific, you know, thought leader in this area that really comes to mind for me at the moment. I'll let you know if I think of something, Liliana.
I'm going to jump into, okay, Heidi, go ahead. And I have
go
one
ahead.
question that is coming up that maybe Heidi can start with this one. And this is from the audience right now. So what are some of the best marketing channels for an older population who may not be avid users of social media?
Oh boy. So again, I think I'm working in a world where we have channels that I've never used in healthcare before. We have, and so think of some of our smaller communities here in Alaska. We have community health aides. We've got tribal leaders. We've got community leaders. We've got city leaders. And so it's amazing how getting the word out can be multi-channel, because I'm actually not a huge social media fan. I've never kind of got on board with it. And so I'm glad I have a team of people who really enjoy doing it. To me, I'm more grassroots. I like word of mouth. I love who in different communities do people trust for information, and how do I get involved in those channels? And so I'm a chamber, I'm a Rotary, I'm a, you know, meeting with city leaders, meeting with tribal leaders, meeting with religious leaders. And it's, so to me, it's how do you become a member of the community and use many channels outside of the traditional ones to build trust and get your information where it needs to go, and know that it's an interactive. And kind of leading back to the last question, to me, I love getting tips and thoughts and examples from other industries. So I think we tend to live in our own industry a lot. Some of the best tools I've gotten for healthcare I've received from outside.
That's perfect. And then the next, oh, go ahead. Hey, Katie, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, sometimes the resources associated with like a large survey or something of that, something along those lines can be really difficult for smaller nonprofit organizations, but a good focus group is very easy to put together. And you can find out amazing nuggets of information. I mean, when you asked that question, I immediately thought of a very special older person in my life that watched my kids when they were little. And this is a person who still to this day does not have a cell phone, does not use credit cards, you know, is very kind of traditional in that way, and doesn't have a computer. So I think to myself, like, how do I get a hold of that person? Well, I mean, it's hard to conceive, right? Like if you're a person that is on your computer all day with your multiple screens. So I think like really some down and dirty focus groups, you can do those like through community centers. and other kind of, I mean, you could reach out to, like, I think Heidi said, some of these more grassroots organizations, whether it's kind of like the city or some of the Chamber of Commerce, the Kiwanis Club, there's a lot of places like that where you could find, I think, 10 to 15 really excited people to tell you like where they get that information. You might be surprised to find out that they're still reading the Skagit Valley Herald in its print version.
Right.
Even though, I could never imagine subscribing. Sorry, I just couldn't do that.
Well, thank you, because that's actually best practices. When we see that in the academic literature, a lot of partnership with community-based organizations, building that trust when the time of need. And there's a lot of questions about fundraising. So this is a lot of fun, and we're going I can't believe time is flying. So can you share some of the fundraising strategies? Like, who are your biggest donors? What channels do you use to reach out to different segments? Like if it's someone older, someone a student, someone in between, whether it's a patient or a donor. So the strategies between the two.
So I'm happy to start with this one. So I'll go back to my bigger healthcare experience on this one because it's more pertinent with a major foundation as part of the organization. And again, it's different channels for different purposes. So grateful patients, there's nothing better than having someone whose life was saved send you $5 and say thank you. So there was definitely the grateful patient channel that was kind of a constant flow of smaller funds and sometimes huge funds, depending on the means of the person. And then, you have the opportunity when you're building new buildings, building new wings, doing renovations to kind of get those donors that want their name on something. And so that's always a big target, usually for obviously big donations. And then there's your partners in the healthcare industry, and whether it's a gala and bringing all your vendors in, or a gala that, you bring all your partner in healthcare providers and physicians in and celebrate something. So in healthcare, obviously, philanthropy is a huge, huge necessity, but it's also a way for people to say thank you. It's a vehicle. So we need the money to help sustain our mission and grow our services and bring more services to the community. But on the same kind of vein, people want to be able to thank their provider and thank the organization that saved their life or delivered this beautiful baby for them. And a lot of times they can't give money directly to that person. And so having a foundation is a great way for an organization or a grateful person is a good avenue for them to say thank you back for something we did for them. So it's both, and it's a fascinating part of, in healthcare at least, doing that balance is a fascinating balance between fundraising and being a nonprofit and doing it in a way that's not icky to patients.
Okay.
It's a fine line.
I'm going to bounce that question to Katie and expand a little bit because Heidi, you touch about events management, galas. So maybe Katie, you can expand what fundraising strategies you use, and if you use any events to attract new volunteers, new donors, new students. How do you manage both channels?
Yeah, I kind of have to try on different hats here when I answer this question. So at Western, obviously, we have a large arm of Western that through Western's foundation that really deals with the day-to-day of those efforts, much more so than I do myself. Although I've always thought sort of within the MBA program, the best thing that we can do is at its core is provide a really enriching experience to our students. It's the best marketing that we can do. It's the best fundraising effort. And so I guess if I think of that as in other types of organizations, it's again, that consistent message that isn't a surprise, weeks before some sort of big ask. Like it's putting on a series of webinars. It's finding a way to have your donors and your and people connected come and plant trees on a stream bed, or not on a stream bed, but I guess in a riparian zone. So it's finding ways for that engagement to be kind of consistent. If I think of some of the other organizations that I've worked with as well, like smaller, more local nonprofits, I do think, the annual auction is a thing. I think, we've all survived a lot of online auctions the last 2 years. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with that in coming years. I do think that those are a wonderful way for people to, on a large scale, connect with each other. And to invite other people who might not have awareness of the organization. It's a very comfortable way to broaden your scope, right? Like find 8 people that don't know what your organization does and invite them to come to this wonderful celebration. Problem, of course, is those are really expensive. And they have their limits, I think, in terms of what they can provide. I mean, from a fundraising standpoint, certainly some do it better than others. What is the secret sauce? I honestly don't think it's really that auction itself. I think it's the work that has been done on the front end to have, other companies locally that can get their name on the banner, that can get exposure for their company and send a group of individuals. So, I mean, I do think fundraising is such a challenge. But I do think that idea that you message consistently to those people and provide value and demonstrate kind of the good work that you're doing throughout the year is really important for kind of a sustainable model.
Education is another vehicle, because I was on the board of a nonprofit kind of senior health agency, and you can fundraise and just get the word out about who you are by doing an education, whether it's a class in something or a seminar on something or an expert on, we do seminars on aging and healthy aging or fitness classes on aging. And, it's a way to kind of cast that net through education. And we get volunteers, we get donations because people didn't understand, but you have them captive in an education forum. And as they learn, it's a way to engage those that it's a different avenue that's maybe less than an auction or, more accessible. But if you have a small nonprofit that you have the ability to do a seminar, educate people, it's another way and cost-effective way to reach a lot of people virtually or in person.
Yeah, and that's a true try practice. So you do an event, you don't ask anything in return, you get the word out, your mission aligned, and it's all bringing people to your organization as long as it's mission aligned, which you both have mentioned. So it's true to your mission, who you are. So I have a few more questions. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, I just had one quick thing. It's just, probably for me, one of the really bright lights in social media has been the ability to kind of crowdsource and disperse information widely at relatively low cost. So I'm not suggesting every nonprofit out there should do crowdfunding, but gosh, I mean, you can get your message in front of an awful lot of people, and you can accept money in a lot of small increments. And I think that can be, I mean, it doesn't work for everybody and it doesn't work in every case, but that is a wonderful way to kind of have the best of both worlds if you can do it kind of tactfully. I think you have to have really strategic goals in mind, and really realistic goals. I feel like I contribute to those all the time because I feel like, my $10 can really add up. And then I can easily share that message with 50 of my friends without a lot of effort. And, even if 5 or 10 of them give, because, they trust me, then, that can be really meaningful.
Well, we've covered a little bit of context, a little bit of how to do it, a little bit of who you're reaching, right? I think, Katie, you mentioned about the diversity of the population and it's changing quickly. So can you speak to your success and challenges reaching vulnerable populations? And I know both, we have a lot of first-gen students at Western, we have people who need healthcare all the time. Can you speak briefly, because we're
Mhm.
wrapping up soon, and I want to get to as many questions as I can.
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief on such a question that somebody could probably talk about an hour on. You know, MBAs, as an example, very traditionally have been for not been for marketed to first generation college students, to the BIPOC population in a very meaningful way. We certainly hope to be doing more of that and doing a better job of it. I have some colleagues at Western who I really lean on, who are experts in the field and have really opened my eyes to some better ways to do that. You know, one of the biggest challenges, though, is not kind of just expanding your program in that direction. It is also, I think, in how you support those students, for example, while they're in the program in a really authentic way. And so that's something we're always talking about and working on. How can we do a better job of making you know, our environment more comfortable for students who, you know, maybe are a very different group than what we had 20 years ago. So, I mean, I think the acknowledgement that it's not just the work in kind of increasing your numbers, but there's a lot of work to be done in how you actually serve those students, making sure that your courses, your cases, all of the conversations that you have are relevant and meet their needs as well is really, really crucial.
Thank you. How about you, Heidi?
So I've learned a lot about how to reach populations that are super remote in this role. So when I think of some of the communities we're trying to reach, there's no running water. You're on an island and you got maybe 30 people that maybe a physician will come to, or a PA, a physician assistant will come to that community twice a year. And so, you know, vulnerable populations is, how do we get basic healthcare to them and communicate when we're going to be there? But it's also, imagine the situation when someone in that community then needs tertiary care in Seattle or up in Anchorage, and how we care and message our ability to care for them through that whole journey, where, you know, you get medevaced all of a sudden to somewhere, and, you know, people in Southie, a lot of people don't feel comfortable going to the bigger cities. They live here for a reason and want to access care. So part of that messaging is, we're going to carry you through that journey, and whether it's providing housing that's comfortable and educating them along, you know, using care coordinators and educating patients along that journey, you know, that's a key element of what we do is, and I think any organization has that responsibility of education of kind of what they're offering and how they support someone through whatever it is they do as a nonprofit. Most nonprofits are here to serve their community in some way. And so how do you get that message out? And how do you support the diversity of people accessing your system, whether it's a millennial, younger consumer that just wants to do it virtually and never actually wants to see anyone in person, to, you know, an elder who is coming from a remote community and is traveling a day and a half to see you, and how do you create that time and space for them to have a different experience with their provider than someone who wants to just do 10 minutes and be in and out. And so reaching patients in that diverse way and meeting them where they need to interact with us is an amazing challenge, but keeps it fun.
Well, it seems to me like there's so much to share between healthcare and education and all the nonprofits that we work in, that we borrow from the for-profit, the corporate sector, but we transfer that, we turn it into a brand, we communicate that, we build trust, and then we use different channels to reach out different stakeholders, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's a patient, a student, a future donor, a partner. And sometimes those people can be the same. So consistency in the message, consistency in the brand, being mission driven, those are kind of like if I'm kind of summarizing and condensing what you both are saying, and kind of how do you go about it with event management, different ways to reach different people, different channels. You use traditional channels for everyone, and then you also use some social media that you're kind of reaching out and casting a wide net, either with big resources or small resources. It seems to me that some of these channels can be scaled up. Some are really small, like Katie saying about a focus group. Some are doable. You can quickly put together a small group, get some feedback. Community base is huge. We go back to the word trust, so do we trust the brand we're trying to communicate? So this actually is kind of bring us up to our time together. So what I like to do is end up with a 20-second question for each of you. So what are the 3 takeaways that you want our audience to remember today? When they go away, what are the top 3 things you want them to know? And I'll decide you decide who wants to start.
I'm going to go with 1. I don't know if I have 3 off the top of my head, but I'll start with 1 and we can go back and forth. So one of the takeaways I want, and if there's students, I don't know who the people are that are the participants, but if there are students out there at Western, MBA students, alumni, one takeaway I want is if you're interested in marketing, healthcare is an amazing place to work, whether you're business, marketing, whatever. I think people overlook healthcare as a place that may feed kind of their interest. And so if I can get anything, there are so many amazing business opportunities. You don't have to be a clinician. Healthcare is an amazing space that is going to be around forever, job security in healthcare. But it's a fascinating space to work in. And if you haven't considered it, think about it.
Okay, thank you. That's a great way. How about Katie? What's your first one?
So I had to, but let me see if my first one is probably my most important, and that is don't be afraid to change. I think there is a misperception that in the marketing world that you build a marketing plan, you execute the marketing plan does what you want. And I feel like so often, actually, that's not the case. You make decisions with the information that you have at that time, with perhaps some forecasting for the future, if you have that luxury. But I also feel like that if we didn't know it before, and so trying things, hopefully not at great expense, but trying something and not having it work can sometimes be as valuable as something that does work, because you won't make that mistake again. And social media might not be the right channel for your organization. So do some local community focus groups, or do something different than your auction if that's if that's not a fruitful fundraising activity for you. There's just some, don't be afraid of change, and treat a marketing plan and like what I think it should be, which is a draft, and edit that over time.
Well, that's wonderful. If you think of 2 other, we'll add those up when we follow up with our participants. So I just want to thank our wonderful panel for being with us today. From all of us at Western Washington University and the marketing department, we want to thank you for joining us today. We also want to thank the Western Washington University Alumni Association for their partnership. And we would like to thank those of you who choose to support the marketing department as part of this webinar. Please remember to support our marketing program of Give Day, May 26th. If you posted a question and it wasn't answered, we'll follow up with you. The recording of this webinar will be emailed to you in the next few days, so check your email for the link. So thank you everyone for being here, and have a great evening. Thanks everyone. Thank you, Katie.
Liliana.
Thank you, Heidi. It's lovely to see you.
Take care, Heidi.